Good afternoon to everybody. It's 1 o'clock. We will give 5 more minutes for everybody to allow to log in. So be patient and we will start at 1:05. Thank you. As a reminder for who just logged in, we will start at 1:05 to allow everybody to log in. Please be patient. Thank you. So everybody, please wait a couple more minutes to allow everybody to log in, and we will start at 1:05. Thank you. Okay, it's 1:05, so we can start. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's Construction Administration Proficiency webinar. For today, we have for presenter Darren Graves, and myself, Monica Colosi, both compliance officers at ISU. To support us, the rest of the ISU team will help to answer to the questions in the background. You are here for part one, which will go through the design professionals of record responsibility. This is the first part of HCI CAP training. The next one, the part two, will take place on December 5th. The training, as we explained in the tip of the day, is provided by the Inspection Services Unit, ISU. The training prepares everyone who wants to better understand the California Administrative Code. Webinars are prerequisite to the voluntary CAP exam, and HCI will track the attendees. So you need to attend the whole time, both webinars, part one and part two, in order to be eligible to take the exam. If you attended the part two last July and you need this part one in order to be eligible to the voluntary CAP exam, you are at the right place. If you need a part two, please remember to register for the part two webinar scheduled on December 5th. The link is provided at the same tip of the day where you found the part one registration link. The voluntary exam will take place at HCI offices. The exam format is a closed book. Tentative dates for the exam are in Los Angeles, January 14th and 15th, and in Sacramento, January 28th and 29th. Applicants that will pass the exam will receive HCI certification, and their names will be posted on HCI website. This webinar offers AIA credit. A certificate of completion will be emailed to the individuals once approved from the AIA. This webinar also is prerequisite to the voluntary CAP exam. This means that if you are attending the webinar as a group, the system will not recognize the individuals. So if you are in a conference room, we recommend you to go to your computer, laptop, and connect individually. If, of course, you want the AIA credit, and if you are interested of getting the presence for the eligibility to the voluntary exam. At the end of the webinar, there will be a pop-up survey. The survey will request your AIA member number. This is very important if you want the AIA credit and the CAP eligibility exam. So please do not ignore the survey at the end of the webinar. If you end up before, you will not get the information and we will not receive your information as well. For your use, we have uploaded the handout and it is in PDF, not in PowerPoint. To find it, go to the handout tab and there you will find the uploaded PDF file. Keep in mind that the handout is not enough to learn for the voluntary exam. The California Administrative Code Chapter 7 is the key for the exam. You are here for roughly 1 hour of presentation, which may allow us to fill your questions. If you have a questions, please write it under the question tab in the GoToWebinar toolbox. We will try to answer all of your questions, but if we don't get to your question or if we start running out of time, go ahead and send the question to isu@hki.ca.gov. If you have a specific question for a specific project, please send us an email at isu@hki.ca.gov. The email address is at the last page of the presentation, so I will not do the spelling for you. If you are experiencing transmission difficulties, go ahead and log off and then log back in using the same login information sent by GoToWebinar. And we will do the same if we are experiencing transmission difficulties on our end. So for today, we have again Darren Graves and myself, Monica Colosi, and to support the rest of we will have the rest of ISU team to help to answer to the questions in the background. So that being said, let's start with the presentation. Darren, if you are ready, I'm passing to you the presentation.
you, Monica, and thank you to everybody who's taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. As Monica explained, there's a survey at the end of the presentation, and please do fill out the survey, especially if you are seeking AIA credits. This is uh, credited by the AIA. You will get one AIA continuing education credit if you tell us your AIA license number. If you do not give us that license number, we won't be able to affirm with the AIA that you did attend. And as Monica explained, your full participation in this webinar is a prerequisite for the voluntary exam in January. It is also worth noting that while this exam and webinar series was offered twice this year, moving forward, it will only be offered once a year. So if you participate in today's webinar and then in December's webinar, you can sit for the exam in January. If you do not pass that exam, you'll have to wait 11 months to go through the webinar series and take the exam in 2026. So as Monica explained, the Construction Administration Proficiency Training is based on Chapter 7 of the California Administrative Code, and the basis of this presentation is to go over project team roles and responsibilities, the formulation of the pre-construction TIO, the Testing, Inspection, and Observation Program, an overview of the construction kickoff meeting with HCI OSHPOD field staff, the issuance of the notice of start of construction, and the value for earning personal knowledge on site through DPOR site visits. So to start, who is the DPOR? This would be the engineer or architect in responsible charge of the project. This is a common use term. It's not defined in the California Administrative Code, but the designer in responsible charge is. Typically, an architect leads every healthcare construction project in the state of California, but projects with limited scope may be led by an engineer specific to that scope. For instance, if the entirety of a project is the structural anchorage of a piece of equipment, a structural engineer may be the designer in responsible charge. Or if the entirety of the project is electrical equipment, an electrical engineer of record could be the designer in responsible charge. Per 7-141 A, B, and C, the design professional of record who's in charge of the project may pass on authority from the DPOR to create a delegate. If that is the case, then the application for the project shall contain the names of the delegated DPOR who's responsible for certain portions of the work. This typically is used in the case of deferred submittals for designs that the architect or engineer in responsible charge is not fully responsible for, but may be designed at a later date to fill out the gaps in the project while it's under initial plan review. Also, there could be an alternate who is an architect or an engineer with shared authority from the DPOR or delegate, and this person would be assigned to the project using the HCI 100 form. An applicant who is the main DPOR may name one or more persons as an alternate, but any individual who is named as an alternate and a delegate must be equally credentialed as the DPOR. So if it's an architect who's an alternate on the project, he needs to be licensed in the state of California, just as the design professional of record and responsible charge is. To go further into who composes the team of a construction effort, there's a contractor of record or COR. This, per CAC 7-143, is the entity that shall construct the work in accordance with the approved construction documents on behalf of the hospital governing board or authority. COR is a common use term. It's not defined in the CAC, but that is a contractor, and it should be clarified there's only one COR per project. And then every project that is under construction is assigned an IOR or a team of IORs. That would be the inspector of record. And this is an independent inspector or group of inspectors who are certified by OSHPOD to perform inspections on the construction of healthcare facilities in California, who is compensated by the hospital governing board or authority for providing those services and is found satisfactory by the DPOR in charge of administering the work. This individual must be approved for the project by HCI and OSHPD per CAC 7-212, and there shall be sufficient inspectors and a number that is capable of adequately inspecting the work. So a small project may have one inspector, but a larger project, such as a massive hospital expansion or a replacement hospital, would have a team of inspectors in order to accommodate the work as it is moving forward. And then finally, who is the owner representative? This would be the individual or group of individuals who manage the project on behalf of the hospital governing board or authority. This entity is not defined in the CAC, but has an instrumental part in every project, most notably keeping the project team oriented towards schedules and timelines and acting on behalf of the owner. This person may also help with the contractor or the designers in interfacing with the clinical staff of the hospital in question. So the point of this presentation is to clarify that design professionals' responsibilities do go far beyond the preparation of the construction documents, which are the plans, the specifications, and the TIO. The beginning of Chapter 7 outlines project submittal requirements and plan review requirements and processes, but once a project moves through plan approval, the design professional responsibilities continue, and they involve the formulation of the TIO, approved construction document administration, and coordinating and participating in the kickoff meeting with the OSHPD field staff. The main responsibility for the DPOR is preparing and administering the TIO program, preparing and submitting ACD and NMA applications and distributing those to the project team once approved, directing the work, such as, or primarily giving direction to the contractor, interpreting the drawings for the IOR, and clarifying any questions tied to the design documents for the contractor, managing the ACD and NMA logs for the duration of the project. So as the project changes as a result of RFIs or submittal requirements or client requests, the submitted ACDs and NMAs shall be tracked by the design professional of record, presented to OSHPD field staff at request by that field staff person, and should be an active living document for the duration of the project. The DPOR shall also manage the TIO. This is not the job of the IOR. We've noticed that the IORs have taken a lot of responsibility over the TIO in the last couple of years, or maybe even since before that. And while they are the ones who are performing the tests and inspections as prescribed by the TIO, an IOR is not responsible for holding the TIO and managing changes to the TIO as a result of the project. That is the job of the architect or engineer in responsible charge. The DPOR should also review submittals, and what we hope they do more often than not is to earn personal knowledge on site. This would include specifying each professional who's listed on the project, and the frequency of site visits. The frequency of these site visits should be communicated to OSHPD field staff, so we have a better understanding as to how often the DPOR and alternates or delegates are coming out to observe the work, so they get a better understanding of what may be going on in the field rather than just relying on pictures or RFIs. It's better to be on site to actually visually and physically discern changes to the work. Also, the DPOR's main task is to verify that the work is aligned with the approved construction documents, and towards the end of the project, manage the construction through oils resolution, punch listing, and the project closeout process. So after plan review and prior to construction, the DPOR should be coordinating construction documents for OSHPD submittals, including the TIO. prepare and share the approved construction documents to the project team once it is approved by HCI and OSHPD, and to interview and identify the inspector of record. So this goes back to a point being that the inspector needs to be determined capable of performing his duties by the designer professional of record. It could be through interviews, phone calls, evaluation of past work that the IOR has participated in, past projects that the IOR has inspected. The IOR is assigned to the project with HCI FD 124 form, and during the IOR evaluation, the IOR shall provide an IOR workload report as part of his or her application. The regional compliance officer will use that workload report in order to deem whether or not the inspector is capable of performing adequately on an additional project, and that he or she is not spread too thin and potentially may slow down the contractor because he or she is not available at any given moment. And then the design professional should be organizing a kickoff meeting with OSHPD and HCI field staff. So in regards to formulation of the TIO, the design professional of record defines the scope of the project with construction documents, starting with initial client meetings and medical planning and schematic design and design development. The DPOR is the individual with the most intimate knowledge of the project as it's going through plan review, and thus he or she is probably the individual who is most qualified to list out the tests and inspections that are required to make sure that the project is built according to the plan. Thus, it is his or her responsibility. The DPOR should be describing and identifying required tests, inspections, and observations on the TIO form in sections B, C, D, and E. Any DPOR could create his or her own form if they want to, but most use the HCI provided form, which is available on our website and is always submitted during the plan review process for initial plan review, and then resubmitted to the compliance officer once the project has reached plan approval. HCI does review the TIO form as a plan approval process, and then it is reviewed at a later date by field staff. And IORs and special inspectors are required to adhere to the TIO guidelines. In further formulating the TIO, the DPR is required to assign responsible parties or agencies or to perform each test as outlined in sections B, C, D, and E. The DPR should provide sample test and special inspection reports for each type of project test or special inspection that is listed on TIO to HCI field staff for that staff member's review prior to the start of construction. This is typically presented to the compliance officer at the beginning of every project. This does mean that the DPOR should be coordinating with the contractor record and the subcontractors to discern who is actually going to be the responsible party for each test or inspection. The listing of the responsible parties and issuance of sample tests typically comprise the first change of the TIO as it's being accepted for construction use by the compliance officer. It should be clarified that responsible parties can be subcontractors, inspectors, and OPAA labs. These are OSHPD pre-approved agencies who have been evaluated and determined capable of providing testing for healthcare construction projects. The list of OPAA agencies is available on the HCI website. And if you are utilizing an OPAA agency, sample tests are not required for that agency or that test. Also, DSA, LEA evaluated agencies can be used. And if your project is utilizing such agencies, please look into PIN 58 for the specific requirements to carry forward DSA, LEA agencies onto the project. So moving down into section F of the TIO, the DPOR will coordinate with the facility and the contractor to determine what the milestones, phases, and stages of the project will be, and consolidate them in section F. The snapshot that you see on the right side of the screen, that is what the TIO looks like when you receive it. There are 5 milestones that are just default. They don't need to be used. Obviously, construction final will be used, but the line items that are listed above do not need to be used by the DPOR if they choose not to. However, if one wants to get in substantial compliance for a certain portion of the work, that portion of the work should definitely be defined as a milestone in section F. The DPOR will be organizing IOR responsibilities in section G of the TIO if there are multiple IORs on a project, or if they can't fit it in section G, they can present an IOR matrix to the field staff for review. And everyone should know that every IOR listed on a project needs to inspect. A purely administrative IOR is not permissible. So to recap, the DPOR is in charge of the TIO per California Administrative Code section 7-141. The DPOR should be structuring the TIO program to best suit the project. And the TIO can be amended throughout construction by the DPOR as needed if the needs of the project change, if an inspection or test needs to be added or eliminated because of project scope changes. Every time the TIO is adjusted, it should be noted in section J at the end of the TIO with the unique delta for each amendment. And the DPOR should be signing and dating that amendment prior to presenting it to the compliance officer, who will also acknowledge and then initial in the right-hand column in section J. So pre-construction meeting is considered a best practice for any project. We suggest that every project with a contract sum greater than $5 million does have a pre-construction meeting in order to better align the project goals with inspection requirements, contracting requirements, and field staff availability. Prior to construction and after plan approval, we definitely appreciate the opportunity to be familiarized with the scope of the project. The DPOR should be the individual or entity organizing a pre-construction meeting, and the pre-construction meeting shall include the project team, which is an owner representative, HCI field staff, so that would be a compliance officer, a district structural engineer, and a fire life safety officer that's already assigned to your facility. If you go to our website and you look for the facility detail and you punch in the facility ID number of any healthcare facility in California, you will get a list as to who the regional compliance officer, the structural engineer, and the FLSO who is assigned to that facility. The pre-con meeting should obviously also have the contractor and, most importantly, the design team, the AOR, SCOR, MEOR, EEOR, and CEOR, potentially the geotechnical engineer of record if the project includes a massive amount of excavation and questionable earthwork. And the IOR and approved agency should also be included. We publish tips from the experts, and if one looks at page 75 of the tips of the experts, you will see an even longer list of certain individuals who could be invited to a pre-construction meeting. The attendees for this meeting should be determined by the DPOR and the owner, but the individuals listed on this slide are pretty much the minimum, but you could include clinical staff, executive staff for the facility, anybody who's part of the project or will be affected by the project and should know what the project timelines are or whatever you guys are discussing in that pre-construction meeting. The purpose of this pre-construction meeting is to orient the project team to project goals, concepts, the schedule of completion, and AHJ participation. And you also could invite the local authority having jurisdiction if there is a lot of crossover between local fire departments and the FLSO in regards to construction of fire water lines and fire sprinkler systems, et cetera. But that would be something that's unique to certain projects. So prior to construction, it is required that a notice of start of construction be filed. So as soon as the contract is awarded, the owner or the authority of the facility, which is not the DPOR or not the IOR, shall issue a notice of start of construction to HCI. This is known colloquially as the NSOC or the NSC, or some people call it the NOSOC, but it is the HCI FD 801 form, which is found on our website, and it includes the name and address of the contractor, the contract price, the date upon which the contract was awarded, and the date of construction start. And also, you should definitely include the OSHPOD project number, as that is our means of identifying the project. The DPOR could be asked to facilitate issuance of this form, and construction shall not start until the form is filed within the project record on EPR. The contractor should have an individual as a responsible party who is identified to OSHPOD on HCI FD 100 and the HCI FD 302 forms. I say that because when the contractor entity is asked to provide a verified compliance report, as are all project stakeholders at some point, the person who is listed in our database is the person who should be signing the form. Can't be just any random contractor person who's working on the job. It needs to be the person who's listed within our database.
So add one thing, if it's okay.
Yeah.
For the notice to start construction. So when it says when the project is awarded, basically means when the building permit is approved. And that is also where the contractor information is provided. Just this one to add for what you were saying. Okay.
Thank you, Monica. So change management, everybody who's on this call is probably very familiar with the fact that construction projects will change throughout the duration of construction, and the manner by which projects should change is outlined in CAC 7-153A and B. That section will tell you how an ACD is an amended construction document, which is also known as a material alteration, which by code impacts the project. An ACD needs to be submitted to HCI for review and approval. Only after the approval may the DPOR distribute this ACD to the project team for construction. If field staff determines that work has been completed, which is not in the approved documents, we will note it in our field visit report and cite you, and probably just cite this section saying it's an infraction because there's work performed that is not in the approved documents. So then in 7A or 7-153B, the NMA or a non-material alteration, which is not impacted by the code, is defined. So a non-material alteration is further clarified in CAN 1-7-153B. The latest update to that CAN was released in July of this year. So if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest downloading it and reading it. Often the DPOR issues an ACD, which includes NMAs. This is not entirely beneficial to the project because it can confuse the amount of changes that are affecting the work. And if you look at the CAN that I just mentioned, it will describe how NMAs should be submitted, as well as when to fold them into an ACD. Like, for instance, if you're creating a new sheet that's full of NMAs, it should be submitted as an ACD after the NMA has been concurred with. So the main difference between NMAs and ACDs is that an NMA, after issuance to field staff and under the DPOR responsibility and risk, may be distributed to the team for construction prior to concurrence. So if a DPOR emails an NMA to me or any other field staff member on Tuesday of this week, and we haven't had a chance to look at it until next Monday, that NMA could be submitted to the contractor for construction prior to our concurrence, but you do need to understand that field staff can determine that something is presented as an NMA is actually material altering, and then we will require that it be documented in ACD, at which point the rules for ACDs will apply to that scope of work. So it is a small risk to try and move on NMAs prior to concurrence. The NMA and ACD changes shall be tracked by a change log, and this change log shall be made available to HCI field staff upon request. Also, if you read CAN 1-7-153B, you'll see that if an NMA is issued to field staff and field staff has not responded within 30 days, that NMA is deemed concurred with. But if a field staff member rejects the NMA and says that it is materially altering, then the DPOR should be submitting an ACD for that. Or, if they don't want to, then they can say that that's not going to be part of the project scope. So during construction, DPOR responsibilities are also tied to deferred submittals. The DPOR is required to review, stamp, and sign and submit deferred submittals to HCI. These submittals are all defined as part of plan approval on typically the first sheet of any project under the deferred submittals section. Deferred submittals are submitted in the same manner as ACDs, meaning through the electronic plan review portal. And CAC 7-126A requires that the DPOR submit a schedule for DSI submittals to OSHPOD within 30 days of construction start. So if you're working on a project which has 10 deferred submittals listed on the cover sheet and project starts, we expect to see within 30 days of that contract starting on site a schedule for when those 10 DSIs will be submitted. The purpose of that is to align our staff resources with the DSI submittals so we can review them in a timely manner and not hold up construction as a result of DSI issuances. What I've seen and what many people see is some electric coordination studies which are required end up being held or not submitted until the 11th hour of any project. And that could potentially hold up project closure, because if that DSI isn't approved in time for the project to close, then the compliance officer won't be able to close the project and it'll stay open until that DSI is actually approved. The DPOR should also be maintaining a submittal and shop drawing log from the contractor. Field staff typically won't ask for it, but you should maintain it for the project duration. And a DPR should be directing the work through submittal reviews and approvals in a timely manner. Inspectors and OSHPOD field staff will not inspect or observe the work based on project submittals, just like we won't inspect or observe the work based on RFIs, but it is definitely part of the construction process that the DPOR is expected to manage through construction.
May I add one thing on that? If it's okay?
Monica? Yep.
So basically, shop drawings and submittals are considered as tools. So like you were saying, exactly, HCI doesn't base anything from the submittal or shop drawings, again, because those are tools. What we pay attention are approved construction documents, which do not include, again, shop drawings nor submittals. RFIs might be as an NMA ish, so it depends from case to case, but that is basically to reinforce what you were saying before. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. So personal knowledge, this would be gained by site visits of reasonable frequency to administer the project work. The DPOR shall perform periodic visits, but knowledge may also be obtained from reporting of others via field observation reports. Depending on the size and scale of the project, Site visits may be daily, weekly, or bi-monthly, or perhaps only once if it's a tiny project. The frequency of the DPOR observation shall be communicated to the FCU team for the project, and verified reports are based on personal knowledge of the project, which are required by the DPOR or HCI at project milestones in Section F of the TIO and at the conclusion of the project prior to issuance of construction final per CAC 7-151A. And if you're familiar with the verified compliance forms, you'll see that the latest version, which was released this summer, asks that the responsible party, the DPOR or the IOR or the contractor, inform us how the personal knowledge was obtained in Section C of the verified report form. There are three options. There's continuous physical presence on site, periodic physical presence on site, or the review of reports submitted by others. So during construction, the project schedule shall be maintained on a hopefully daily basis. If construction is halted for over 2 weeks, the IOR is responsible to inform HCI that the project shall be suspended, and the compliance officer will suspend that project within our database. The project will not resume until such time as HCI is notified that it will start again, and typically require that a new notice of start of construction be filed, alerting us that the contractor is going to resume work on the project in question. Project files for any project. The IOR shall maintain a current set of approved plans on the project site at all times. The project files may be electronic so long as they're accessible. They can also be full-size printouts. The IOR shall maintain all test and inspection reports on file at all times and immediately distribute any failed tests or inspections to the DPOR for resolution. The IOR shall notify the contractor upon discovery of construction which deviates from the approved documents. And the IOR should report to the DPOR any seeming errors in the approved documents. And it is the responsibility of the DPOR to interpret the approved documents for both the IOR and the contractor. So now what? Well, thank you for attending today's webinar. As Monica mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, this was the first in a two-part series. The second webinar will be on December 5th this year. That's a Thursday. It will also be from 1 to 2 p.m. And if you participate in both webinars, you are qualified to sit in on the voluntary exam, which will be held in Los Angeles on January 14th and 15th, and in Sacramento on January 28th and 29th. I say if required after each one of those, because if the individuals who request to take the exam don't require us to have it for 2 days in terms of the number of applicants, we won't have it for 2 days. We'll have it for one. But if you do sit for the exam and you pass it, the certification shall be posted on the HCI website, and that database will be updated after each exam and maintained for up to 2 years. The 52 individuals who took the exam and passed it in July of this year are currently listed on the HCI website, and they will be up there until 2026, at which point they'll have to take the exam again if they want to have their name up there in perpetuity. As stated earlier, this training and voluntary exam will only be offered once annually moving forward. So this webinar, December's webinar, and then the January exam, that will be the only chance for you guys to take the exam next year. To take it again, you'll have to wait until November and December of 2025 to sit for the exam in 2026. So thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to teaching you more on December 5th. So Monica, if there are any questions, I guess now is the time to go over them.
Questions. Yes, there are a few questions. So, first of all, of course, how many questions will be at the exam?
Okay, so the exam is based on Chapter 7 of the Administrative Code. It will be 30 questions. It is closed book. You will have 1 hour to take the exam. And in order to get a passing grade, you need to get 80% or better, which means you have to answer 24 out of 30 questions correctly.
Thank you. Now let's go to the questions more specific for the part one. So this is regarding the NMA. How would you signify in the NMA form that an NMA were automatically concurred?
Wouldn't be indicated on the form, like the NMA cover sheet doesn't have a place for that, but your NMA log should have a column for who concurred with the NMA and when. And if you are seeking to use that 30-day rule, I would suggest putting in a column that says date of issuance and then 30 days later, date of automatic acceptance.
Perfect. Thank you. So to reinforce what you are saying, the log is basically the design professional record. Continue to update the log. What we will do is just to provide the stamping to the form for the concurrence. And you, design professional record, will update the log with all the information. So, for example, Darren concurs to NMA, let's say number one, today on November 7th. You will update your log for that specific NMA1, that on November 7th, Darren concurred to the NMA. And like this, you will have your updated log. Thank you, Darren.
Thanks. And yeah,
Next.
to further that point, if I don't concur with it and I don't address it in any manner, you can put in the date December 6th or whatever 30 days is from today and say date of automatic acceptance.
Thank you. Now, there is a question regarding if NMAs can be collected in an ACD. If it's okay, I will start to answer. And if you want to add something more, Darren, of course, go ahead. Is that okay that I start to answer?
Of course.
Okay. So keep in mind an NMA, once that you issue the email to us for concurrence, automatically you are the design professional, you, with your knowledge, you are the one responsible to issue the NMA and say, yes, this is a legit NMA. So based on your knowledge and knowing that is on risk, of course, you, once that you will send the email to us for concurrence, you basically can direct the contractor to say, go ahead and move forward with whatever it is that NMA. If you include the NMA into a change order, um, you need to consider that you need to wait for the change order to be approved in order to have everything in the package of the change order to be built, because the contractor can only build per approved construction document. So think strategically if that NMA really truly makes sense to include into an ACD, or you're risking to block some construction progress. So think about the construction, coordinate with the contractor, talk always to the field staff for this strategy. So Darren, do you want to add any other thing for that?
I would say this game or strategy that you're coordinating with the project team to get NMAs and material altering changes into the project, that process is really outlined by the CAN 17-153B. The 8 categories of NMAs are outlined, and the manner by which you could fold NMAs into ACDs is also outlined in there. So I would refer to that.
Thank you. Another question, this is regarding the TIO. What is the difference between inspection report and testing report on VCR?
Well, the inspecting, so You mean the line items? Because sections B, C, D, and E delineate what inspections are required versus what tests are required. The
Right.
inspection reports, for me, I would say it would be the inspector's daily reports tied to that line item versus the testing report would be something from the responsible party who isn't the inspector, who performed the test that then the IOR reviewed and took no issue with. And also the DPOR reviewed and took no exceptions to,
Yes,
such as
yes.
chlorination reports.
Wonderful. Thank you, Darren. Also to add, um, in the TIO, so basically there are the responsible parties. Those are the people that basically provide the test. The IOR is the one that inspects, like you were saying, Darren. So if you guys think how is the formatting for the TIO, there are different boxes, right? So, who provides the report for the testing is the responsible parties. Who provides that inspection report, like Darren, you're saying, is the IOR and has a specific box in the TIO where we'll sign off. All these reports basically reinforce the VCR that is tied to the milestone. Let's see if there is any other question. Here there is another question. Does the current set to be kept and maintained on site include concurred NMAs?
Yes, it should. I mean, one thing that I've seen project teams do is take concurred NMAs and put them in front of the sheet that may have been modified by that NMA. So if an NMA has a sketch that modifies sheet A121, like a section of A121 plan got changed by an NMA, you can fold in that concurred NMA on top of that plan. And if you're managing everything through document control system like Bluebeam or Procore, the same thing could happen. You could take the concurred NMA in a digital format and put it on top of the previously approved sheet. But both versions of the drawings should be there. The 30 by 42 sheet with the OSPOD stamp, as well as the concurred NMA, which alters that plan.
Right, because they are all part of the approved construction document set. So the approved construction document set is a mixed match, basically, between the original approved drawings, ACDs, NMAs, whatever is part of this needs to be on site. It needs to be all put together on site, or like you are saying, or also electronically, but available on site, of course. I don't see. Oh, there is another question. What's a functional program?
So a functional program is used to determine the programmatic requirements of a project, and it's submitted with the original project application to the office staff for review. Compliance officers review functional programs. I know I do if I'm presented with an ACD that changes the scope of the project. I'll refer back to the originally reviewed and approved functional program to make sure that all those programmatic requirements are still being upheld in the project, even in spite of the scope change. So my answer to that would be that it's defined in Chapter 7, and it is a document that is submitted with construction documents during plan review. It helps shape the programmatic requirements of any project.
Thank you. A question asks, can you provide more clarification about ACD versus NMA? So if I may, the simple way to consider the difference between the two of them. First of all, keep in mind both basically are a modification in the drawings. But the difference between NMA and ACD is the NMA, as the acronym says, is non-material alteration, which means there is nothing that can interfere with the code. And ACD is an alteration of the code. And so that needs to be approved by HCI as a legit change order. Do you want to add any more things, Darren, for that?
Just that an ACD cannot be constructed to until after the ACD is approved versus an NMA could be constructed to prior to official concurrence. And we go into further detail on the differences between NMA and ACD in the next webinar. We have many more slides on that definition or both of those definitions. So please tune in on December 5th.
Thank you. And there is a question, who has a responsibility for posting RFIs and change orders to the record drawing set? And who checks this?
RFIs do not need to be posted to the approved drawing set because they won't be inspected to. Change orders, meaning ACDs after they're approved, that's a decision that the project team can come up with. I've seen contracting entities do that. I've seen inspectors do that. And I've seen architects do that. When I was working as a designer, our office kept, for every project that we were involved with on HCI projects, we had folders tied to always having the most up-to-date sheet of every sheet in the project. So like we'd have a PDF for sheet A200 and then another PDF for sheet A201, and it would always be the latest in that folder. So the old versions of the sheets lived in like a voided folder that we didn't look at. So that way we could always pull up the latest reference drawing to review when we're looking at RFIs or presenting NMAs or ACDs, for instance. In terms of having that set on site, it is the IOR's responsibility to have the latest approved set available on site because that's what he is inspecting to. But the contractor may also want the same thing for project engineers to review and refer to when they're, administering or building to the work. So it is a project team decision, but the code requires that it's the inspector who maintains that file system.
Thank you. I see now questions. I mean, I'm scrolling and I know that we are running out of time. So chances are we are going to respond to these questions via email, or probably we will clarify this one on the part 2 of the webinar on December 5th. But again, just to make clear, and my apologies because I didn't pay attention when you answer. Did you share the percentage for passing the CAP exam?
To pass the exam, you need to get 80% or better, which means answering 24 out of 30 questions correctly. And if you have additional questions, you can email us at isu@hki.ca.gov or me at darren.graves@hki.ca.gov.
Wonderful. Thank you, Darren. So just to let you know, we will respond to the questions that we see on the question tab. Again, we are running out of time. So this one concludes our presentation for today. And we truly want to thank you for your interest to expand your knowledge on the California Administrative Code. And we're looking forward to see you at the part 2 on December 5th. And then again, as a voluntary to take the CAP exam in January. Remember, there is the survey right after. And so until next time, stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you. Bye.